So the Big Ten had their preseason honorees, and Michigan had 3 of the 12. Ohio State had 4. Oregon had 2, and there were a handful of other players on the list as well. It's kind of a strange list. There's just 12 players, not a full offense, not a full defense, no offensive linemen in there. I don't know. Anyway, Michigan had 3 of those players. And for all the talk about how many players they lost to the NFL, there are a lot of really, really high-end guys that are going to be playing for the Wolverines this year. How many are on offense? Well, Donovan Edwards certainly is one of them. We'll hear a quote from him later in this particular segment. But I think an underrated element about the challenge for Michigan to get back to the playoff this season is they have a difficult schedule. Because we're not talking about a Big Ten championship just with their Big Ten schedule. Or I should phrase that a little bit better. When you talk about a playoff, you're not talking about just winning a Big Ten championship. You're also looking at having a quality non-conference win. Well, week 2, they host Texas, which is a great change of pace for Michigan. Because the UCLA home-and-home series got canceled. I think that was a bummer for college football fans and for fans of both programs. And they were playing nobody schools instead. Like I don't think that was good for anyone. But now they're up in the ante, and they're going from we're playing Bowling Green to we're playing Texas. Texas, oh boy. So they have to play Texas. They also have to play USC at home. I don't know if bullish is the right word on USC. I definitely think they're an 8-win team minimum in 2024 because they have made significant defensive improvements. So you've got Texas at home, you've got USC at home, you've got Oregon at home, you have to go at Ohio State. How many of those games do you think Michigan can lose and make the playoff? Sherrone Moore was asked about the scheduling component, and he said what you'd expect most coaches to say.
I don't know. I think you want to have the competitive nature regardless of what you do. And a lot of these schedules are scheduled out a while from now. So for us, we're just going to play whoever we have to play.
Boy, I love that he mentioned the insanity, the craziness, the ridiculousness of college football scheduling. It is absurd. So Michigan's got to avoid a stumble against a team that when you look at their schedule, you'd say, oh, there's no way they lose that particular game. So that's standard number 1. I think they're incredibly capable of that, regardless of the quarterback play, which I'll get to here in just a sec. But all 4 of those games, 3 of them being at home, that's a benefit to Michigan, 100%. Because Sherrone Moore talked about not being content and that, at a place like Michigan, you don't have a grace period. You don't have, a benefit of the doubt sort of year of like, oh, you just won a national championship. Who cares what happens this year? No, he seemed very, very serious when talking to the media earlier today that is not the way that he views the situation, not what he expects the fans to demand of him and his program. I tend to agree with that particular suggestion, but this schedule is pretty sneaky tough because they are going to be underdogs at home against Oregon. They're going to be underdogs at home against Texas. They are favored against USC, and they're going to be underdogs on the road against Ohio State. Now, does that mean everything? Is that the be-all, end-all? No, underdogs win in college football all the time. And one thing that I noticed last year in particular, looking at betting lines and teams that ended up winning, a bigger line isn't saying the same thing about a matchup in college as it does in the NFL. So if there is a point spread that is between 8 to 10 points in the NFL, there is an incredibly low chance that underdog wins the game outright. It's a low chance in college football, but it's not as low. It's not exactly the same. Like an 8 to 10 point spread feels more like a 5 to 6 point spread in the NFL. So could USC go into Ann Arbor, beat Michigan? Yeah, I think that is entirely possible. Am I predicting it? No, I'm just saying it's possible. That's it. I'll see how many of you get upset at that particular notion. But that element of the schedule, very, very tough. Those 3 home games at Ohio State, which I think is going to be a loss, that's going to be challenging because you have to be 10-2. Paul Feinbaum, for all the hot takes he's had, he said something smart recently on ESPN when talking about Michigan and whether it's a reset year, that 9-3, you're holding your breath on Selection Sunday for the at-large teams that get into the college football playoff. I think he's right that you're holding your breath. I think you would go into that with a 70% expectation you're not going to get in. Because you are going to have the 4 auto bids. You're going to have the group of 5 team. Okay, so now we have 7 spots left for the at-large. I think you're going to have the conference title game losers from the Big Ten or the SEC rather. So that's 7 spots that are gone. I think you'll have one other SEC team that finishes at 10-2. Okay, that's another spot gone. Now you're down to 4 spots. And look, could a 93 Michigan be in there? Sure. If they've got a win over Texas and a loss to, Oregon, Ohio State, and USC, for instance, but they beat everybody else and they look good doing it. Yeah, that's entirely possible. One question I have for Michigan, though, and all the fans out there, I know some of you don't like me, and that's fine. I don't have a personal vendetta against Michigan, contrary to what you might think. But the question I have is, when you have this level of a quarterback debate going into fall camp, can you expect to be a playoff team? Should you expect to be a playoff team? That's a difficult proposition when you lost 18 players to the NFL draft. And yes, there are several talented individuals, but to pretend that this year's Michigan team would beat or be close to, frankly, last year's Michigan team, like if you put on the field 2023 Michigan against 2024 Michigan, who's winning that football game? I got my money on 2023 every day of the week and twice on Sunday. But I think Alex Orji is really intriguing. He's not the only quarterback option available, but when you watch him throw, you go, got a little zip. We know he can move. Maybe he makes the running game just as dynamic as it was last year with J.J. McCarthy. That probably comes down to the offensive line. But Sherrone Moore spoke about the quarterbacks. Here's what he had to say.
And like I said earlier, I think the number one thing is who's going to take care of the football. Who's going to be the guy to take care of the football. Our defense is going to provide them a bunch of different looks. They're going to have Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant running at them, Josiah Stewart and Jay Sean Barham and Will off the edge and Makari and all these guys and the different looks. So who's going to take care of the football? Who's going to make a play? And then next thing, who's going to really lean on the team win and team first mentality? And for us, we'll get a good feel as we go through training camp. Don't know what the day is, don't know when it'll be, but you guys will know as soon as we do.
It's a good reminder. You don't need to come in and go for 300 yards a game. This is not an air raid. It is quite the opposite of an air raid. Can you play complementary football? That's one of the reasons that my confidence in Michigan's ability to, have a less severe drop-off than Washington is pretty high, because their system is more translatable because it's not quarterback dependent. You just need your quarterback to be fine, capable, good, decent, solid, and I think they can do that. And speaking of Michigan's schedule, we'll close with this note. There's a national championship game rematch in October. I think Michigan should feel really confident because it's a terrible matchup for Washington going into the game. Donovan Edwards was asked about his performance in the national championship game and what it means for going into Seattle this year. I think it's a game Michigan wins. I don't know if they're rolling by 20 to 25 points as they did a year ago, 34-13 final score of the national championship game. I don't think it's that sort of score. I think Michigan wins, but could it make them uncomfortable? Yeah, it absolutely could in Seattle.
Yeah, it always was a growing process, but yes, like that's my guy, and I love and I respect him.
Donovan, how much do you feel your performance in the national championship game against Washington gave you a running start for this season? And looking forward to that matchup in Seattle, is there anything different about this season knowing that it's a Big Ten game?
The way that I look at this is loud. Is this loud? Too loud for y'all? Just a tad bit, right? Hell yeah, my bad. The way that I look at that national championship game, I was just going through a lot mentally and emotionally. It was a roller coaster for me. I'm not afraid to talk about that. And I was reading the book of Job because I'm reading the Bible from front to back. So I was in the book of Job at that time, and if you don't know about that story, everything was taken from Job. He had everything, thousands of cattle, a whole family, beautiful family, and everything was taken from him. And ultimately, God blessed him. He multiplied his blessings, and I think that's what happened with me after that during the national championship game, because I stayed patient, I stayed humbled, and I didn't, curse anybody out. I didn't, go against my beliefs or anything like that. I stayed humble in God's eyes. So, ultimately, I think that He's blessed me and multiplied my blessings, and I'm going to continue to do everything that I can to, uphold that righteousness and, be a humble young man.
And then with that Washington game, is there any special relevance to that, knowing it's going to be a Big Ten game versus last year was the national championship? There's kind of two different respects in that game.
Yeah, I'm sure that, just like every other game, Washington's going to give their best to us, and we're going to give Washington our best. So, it's going to be great, especially traveling to Washington. Yeah, when they travel here in 2021, it's going to be a very fun game.
Donovan, do you think you're a different person?
Should be a fun year. Hope you enjoyed the audio clips. Do you know that Washington's a Big Ten team? I mean, I've said it several times on today's show. That national championship rematch isn't a non-conference bout like Michigan and Texas. It's a conference game. And setting reasonable expectations for Jedd Fisch and the Huskies this year, well, that's an important thing to do, and we're going to do that next.